the mighty Citizen Nighthawk. This is a watch which is legendary amongst watch collectors, and rightly so, especially considering that it is a solar-powered watch. Its array of technical features and its very interestingly complex yet focused design make it an excellent first Citizen watch for me to feature on this channel. Quite the opposite of the amazing phenomena of hole punch clouds, where the emptiness and mystery is the fascination caused by an airplane, this pilot's watch is fascinating precisely in its complexity when you stare through the portal of the bezel into this fascinating dial. Citizen had a very trick design innovation when they took an asymmetrical GMT scale and mated it with a slide rule. There's no doubt you're in for something interesting when a watch presents a wider crown at 8 o'clock for adjusting a slide rule bezel than the crown that's available at the 3 o'clock position for adjusting the time. The Star of the Show dial is a perfect example of a design laden with intelligibility, even if, with regard to the order of our understanding, there is quite a bit to learn before you appreciate it. The GMT scale on the center left-hand side of the dial is a perfect example. The asymmetrical stacked index simply corresponds to the color of the airplane hand. So, the white hand pointing to the white index indicates the GMT time that should be read. When the red hand points to the red index, that is the GMT time to be read. Simple, straightforward, once you understand what's going on, while at the same time creating a lot of visual interest with the use of colors, cool airplane hands, and asymmetry. The inner rotating slide rule bezel is actually a complicated mathematical tool. It's a logarithmic scale, a tool for basic math equations, and allows you to do a variety of conversions. Honestly, getting into it in this video would be way too complicated. While I do intend to do a separate dedicated video actually showing certain equations worked out with a slide rule bezel, I can at least point out in the meantime that the instruction manual does a very good job of explaining what a slide rule is and a variety of the calculations that you can work out with a slide rule bezel, many of which are very apropos for pilots and for navigation. There's also explanations of general calculator functions, which I think just for the math nerd are pretty fascinating. The array of colorful scales on the dial is handsomely tied together by bold applied Arabics at 6 and 12, applied indices, and highly legible, fully loomed sword hands. I definitely found myself visually interested in the case design as well. This is a 42.5mm case, 12.5mm thick with 22mm lugs, yet it comes off as very small thanks to its blocky, angular design. It definitely is a little bit on the thicker side with that internally rotating bezel, but the overall width of 42.5mm doesn't make it seem very unbalanced. I love the bold, knurled ProMaster branding and generally the knurling on both of the crowns. But I'm almost even more impressed by the gorgeous caseback, which includes the Citizen ProMaster EcoDrive globe. Simply gorgeous. Can't say the same for the clasp. It honestly feels pretty cheap, like an entry-level Seiko clasp. But as for the case itself, at 200 meters of water resistance, except for that mineral crystal, which as you can see here, is a little bit standing proud of the rest of the case, I think this watch is going to be very sturdy. I honestly think that the mineral crystal here is probably the biggest weakness of the watch. With its raised and flat bevel design, it's going to be prone to scratches, and there are definitely examples of user Nighthawks that are pretty scratchy. I've got to take a moment to show off the caseback a little more with a combination of deep and detailed etching and satin and blasted finishes. This is easily one of the nicest casebacks that's come across my table in any price range. Unfortunately, I don't have a lot of good things to say about the strap. Although it is asymmetrical and definitely a colorway meant to match the dial, it just seems pretty cheaply constructed, and the materials are synthetic, and I don't expect they would hold up very well. Same goes with the clasp. It just feels like a very cheap clasp. Now, there are lots of good reports about the bracelet that comes with this watch, and that's definitely the way I would go. Or I would just spend a little bit of extra money investing in a quality full grain leather aftermarket strap in the pilot style, which I think would really look great on this watch. Thanks to its very short lugs, this watch actually wears great on my 7¼ inch wrist. This has a lug-to-lug width of about 47.2 millimeters for those who are wondering, and that means that it's not going to have a humongous footprint on my wrist, even though the 42.5 millimeter size, when you're looking at the case size, might be kind of intimidating. It just wears very securely on the wrist. Not a lot of overhang. It is a little tall, but not overwhelmingly so, especially considering you've got an internal bezel. And the crowns definitely don't dig in either. They're large enough to easily grab, but small enough to be practical on the wrist. It is a very, very wearable design. Don't let the size scare you off. The loomed hand and indices glow a gorgeous blue, and as Zach at Worn and Wound aptly notes, it's almost like an airplane which shuts off many of its controls when flying in darkness. I'd like to thank MasterOpcom for providing this Nighthawk for review. If you're not a member of MasterOpcom, I'd strongly encourage you to consider it. They're an enthusiast-driven online community with a revolutionary new way to bring the best deals to those who are members of the community. And the recent drop on the Citizen Nighthawk at an amazing price, it filled up almost immediately before I was even done with the video. So if you want to get an excellent deal on a Citizen Nighthawk, sign up at MasterOpcom. Of course, with the Citizen, you're getting a storied Japanese brand, and in 1924, the first branded Citizen watch, the pocket watch, was meant to be widely accessible for consumers. Citizen's great contribution to horology is, of course, the eco-drive movement, launched in 1995. This was the first solar-powered analog quartz watch, and it is a great example of technology that has made wearing a watch for the long term very accessible to people who aren't necessarily interested in mechanical watch servicing. It has no doubt advanced a part of the watch industry in a very positive way. The eco-drive technology in the Nighthawk means that the watch can be powered both by solar and artificial light, and it can hold a charge up to 6 months. Maybe you're an aviation enthusiast and the thought of doing calculations on the fly with your wristwatch makes you want to take off. Or maybe you're just a math guy whose head's in the clouds. Or maybe you just like sophisticated modern design presented in a very legible way. At any rate, this Citizen Nighthawk is a modern marvel. Thanks a ton for watching and liking this video, especially if you made it this far. And if you're new to the channel here, I'd like to invite you to become a subscriber. Thanks again.